Record. We're good?
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Zoom. Okay, good. We're good.
All right. So can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So let me just start by saying welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this. I know some of you here, some of you I've never met before. And we know that we have now less than an hour to go through something that could take a very long time. And so just thank you for your patience and your enthusiasm for this topic of anti-racism. For some of you, this will be a little bit new. For some of this will be a review. If I can get through this soon enough, we can have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, and I'll do my best. Just hold your questions until we get to the end, if that's okay. As Cassandra said, my name is Reverend Lane Cobb. I am an interfaith ordained minister, now leading the Fourth Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Westchester, which is in Mohegan Lake. But I grew up in Tarrytown, and between about 30 years of moving back and forth between Baltimore and New York, I am now back in Tarrytown and have been since 2020. And I'm happy to also be affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Congregation in White Plains, who has a very strong racial justice movement, as does the Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Croton, of which I am also affiliated. So I just wanted to show this picture because I like it and I feel good when I see it. Racism is the pandemic. And I think that we are all here because we recognize that racism has been and is still a huge issue in this country. And until we learn to see each other and love each other and play with each other and be with each other and live with each other and support each other and talk to each other and all those each others, we will not be free in this country. We will absolutely always all be oppressed in some way around this issue. So I just start with that picture because I like it. So I have tried to put some color in some of these slides so we don't fall asleep. So forgive me if some of it pops off the page at you. I thought it might be important to talk about, well, what is an ally? We're definitely going to talk about what is anti-racism. But an ally in general is somebody who has privilege and chooses to stand for and with marginalized communities by taking tangible, ongoing actions to dismantle systems of oppression, right? So somebody that stands with marginalized communities who has some degree of privilege. And we can talk about what that is. We will talk about that a little bit as we go along. But I think that we all benefit by noticing how much privilege and how much agency we have. It is very seldom that we are people who absolutely have no agency, so which means we can't do anything, or no privilege, which means we can't get anything, right? It's very rare that we would have that particular set of circumstances. And I could be wrong, but in this group, I would say probably not. And we're going to talk about what is anti-racism. And so we'll talk about the difference between being a non-racist and an anti-racist. An anti-racist is someone who actively identifies and opposes racism. The goal of anti-racism is to actively change policies, behaviors, and beliefs that perpetuate racist ideas and actions. So we see that word a lot, right? Action and active. So we're talking about an ally, and an anti-racist is someone who is actively taking a stance. Of course, we can be an ally for oppression. It doesn't have to be racism. For our purposes this evening, however, as it's said in the title, we're talking about racism. So why are we here tonight? So I take the case that we are here because we acknowledge several things. And we acknowledge that racism is in the groundwater of this country. It's been here since an inception, and it is still here. Racism and anti-Black sentiment is a major driver of oppressive systems. We acknowledge that. We acknowledge that racism affects everyone, regardless of how we identify racially, socially, or culturally. It affects everyone. Racism is not something that just affects people of color. When we oppress another group of people, we also suffer. And again, these are all concepts that we don't have time to go into in depth this evening. And in a longer course, we can go in depth about that. But take the case that racism, Martin Luther King Jr., right, said that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. We are all affected when someone is oppressed, when someone is marginalized, when someone is attacked. We are all affected, spiritually, emotionally, economically, environmentally. We also acknowledge that it is our responsibility to learn about, identify, and stand against racial oppression. So I am taking the case this evening that is why we are here. And thank you for being here. Button, all right. So how to participate to get the most out of this evening is to listen with an open mind, an open heart, unconditional love and respect, not only for the people who are here with you, but also for yourself, and to listen with humility and empathy. We recognize that it is often difficult in the way we are socialized to have unconditional love for self. And if we don't have unconditional love for self, it is very difficult to have that love for others. In this also, the way we are socialized, being humble is sometimes not a thing. We're often socialized to say, my voice is the most important voice in the room. And we know that that is not so true. And it is important that we take a time to step back and say, wow, let me lean in and listen to how someone else feels. Empathy is crucial for any effective anti-racist movement. We need to be able to listen and put ourselves over there with someone else and consider how is it going for them? Because we don't know. And we don't know what we don't know. So open mind, open heart, unconditional love and respect, humility and empathy. And thank you. I know I'm just moving along. So how to be an effective anti-racist? Number one is to acknowledge that modern day racism exists. And we know that there is a movement that says, no, being colorblind is the way to go. Not seeing color is not an effective anti-racist strategy. It's just not. It's like seeing someone with a disability and saying, oh, well, that person doesn't need any accommodations. They can just get along the same way everybody else gets along. Racism oppresses people. It marginalizes people. And we can talk about we will talk about the empowered versus the oppressed and the spectrum of oppression. But I use that analogy to say someone who is differently abled. And point to this quote by Supreme Court Judge Harry Blackmun, deceased, in 1978. He said, in order to get beyond racism, we must first take account of race. There is no other way. And in order to treat some persons equally, we must treat them differently. Equality does not equal equity. Giving everyone the same treatment, even though they don't have the same access, or they have a disadvantage in some way, is not equity. It's not fair. It's not equitable treatment. And so I've just put 5 of, very off the top of my head, obvious ways in which people of color are oppressed, and how racism, the effects of racism: less likely to receive adequate care from physicians, less likely to receive employment offers, more likely to be shot by police officers, more likely to be treated with suspicion in public places, judged more harshly for crimes they commit, right? These are obvious in the news. Nobody is disputing this. And it's just goes so much deeper than that. So you see the lady with the blindfold on. We have got to take our blindfold off. We have to see race in order to address racism. Refusing to see race or racism is not going to successfully dismantle it. And basically, it's going to allow it to not only perpetuate, but to get worse. How to be an effective anti-racist, number 2, is to recognize our own bias. Recognize our own bias. And we all have biases because of the way that we've been socialized. We are all socialized for survival, right? So we are programmed to consider or judge when we're safe, when we're not safe, when we're comfortable, when we're not comfortable, when we're afraid, we're not afraid. All of these things affect our bias. And Nova Reed, the author of the book, The Good Ally, says to be truly anti-racist, confront the parts of yourself that you hide. Confront the parts of yourself that you hide. These are the things that we are not comfortable with, right? We may notice that there is a group of people that we are biased against. It's not comfortable. We don't want to look at that. But guess what? We have to look our biases in the face, because what you don't look at, you cannot change. So we need to ask ourselves the questions that are listed here on the right? Where do we live? Where do we worship? And where do we shop? Who's there? Is it a diverse population, or do we live in a segregated community? Do we on purpose go to communities of people that don't look and live like us? And why do we live and worship and shop in those areas? What makes us comfortable there? Who do we socialize with and relate to? Who is in our social circles? Who is welcome in our homes and who isn't? Who's in our social and political circles? Why? Why do we align with those people and not others? What assumptions do we make about the way that other people live? We make assumptions. It's been proven that one of the main reasons for perpetuating racism and otherism is because we don't live together. We don't socialize together. It's been shown that it's really hard to be nasty to someone, to marginalize someone that you know and love, that you live with, that you have a relationship with, a rapport with, that you go out to dinner with. We have to make an effort to go outside of our comfort zones and address our own biases, right? What is our opinion about people who don't look, live, think, talk, eat like us? We all have opinions about people who have a different education level than we do, people who are vegetarians or people who eat meat, people who are obese, people who are overweight, underweight, people who have a health issue, people who have particular jobs, people who drive particular kind of cars. It's automatic. It's very important that we look at the automatic nature of our biases and actually we're not to make ourselves wrong for them, but to notice them and go, look at that. Look at that preference. Look at my reaction to that particular person who is wearing those clothes, who has that kind of body, who has that accent, right? Who has that level of education. Look at my opinion about that person and my reaction to them, and just notice it, that I have that reaction. Don't make yourself wrong, just notice and say, oh, why is that? Why is that? Because it comes down to us judging who is worthy. Who is worthy of making money? Who is worthy of being famous? Who's worthy of getting a certain type of education or achieving a particular level of leadership or being employed at all, right? We have a huge bias against people who have been incarcerated in this country. Who's worthy? of being able to vote, who's worthy of being seen out in public or heard or attended to. Why? Why do we think that? Very important. In order to be an effective anti-racist, we've got to look at our biases, even when it makes us uncomfortable. And so I put at the bottom of this slide a link to the Harvard Implicit Association test. This is free. It is the bomb. It is the best thing that you can do. You go on, and I'm telling you, just have fun with it and just notice, because you'll notice that you have biases that you didn't even know you had. Not to make yourself wrong, but just to learn more about yourself so you can be more effective in your allyship, right? The Harvard Implicit Association test. I highly recommend it.
Lane, can you describe it a little bit about what the Harvard test actually does, so we can understand what we're in for?
Well, no, I don't want to take time to do that, Joe. I want to recommend people just go to it because it's self-explanatory. There's a page right there and it's just online. So it's just like a multiple choice kind of thing. So you go and it's multiple choice, and and there's a variety of different exercises, which is why I don't want to take time to talk about it, because I won't do it justice. But it's valuable, it's useful, and it's eerily accurate. Like, it really does show us things that we don't want to see. So how to be an effective anti-racist, number 3. Joe, thanks for asking that question though. Is to educate yourself about historical and present day race-related issues, right? We are in a time when our access to information, people are trying to curtail our access to true history, right? The history of Black and brown people in this country, people are trying to erase it. We have, yes, I'm not going to go into who's doing what, but we know this is true. And so we owe it to ourselves. We have to educate ourselves. The onus is on us. We have to educate ourselves, and then we need to educate each other about the real history of this country as it relates to race and racism, and the present day manifestations of that history. How is that affecting us now? How does that affect who gets access to education? Who gets access? I said all this in the first slide: education, healthcare, employment, housing, food, transportation, right? How does it affect our ability to relate with each other as human beings and not just the other, right? And we talk about in one of these slides, I'm going to talk about otherism. But right now, let's just look. I just put 4 things here. This is not really the point of this slide, but I just want to say, who among us knows that race is an ideological construct? There is no biological reality to race. There is no difference between a person with dark skin and a person with light skin. It was made up. And again, that's not something I'm going to go into, but please look that up if you don't know about that. That was done on purpose, classifying people according to skin color for hierarchical purposes, with people with the light skin at the top and people with dark skin at the bottom and everybody else in between. Who knows that the present day model of policing began with the slave patrols? And believe me, I get a pit in my stomach when I say that, because I know people are going, what are you talking about? Well, we need to look that up. Not that police are bad, but that knowing the history of a system in this country is useful so that we could see where it's lacking and perhaps how to build a better system. If you don't know how something was made in the first place, it's very hard to fix it. So a couple of other things. I have something here about how whiteness was written into law after Bacon's Rebellion, which was the last major uprising of enslaved Blacks and white indentured servants in colonial Virginia in 1600s. right? We don't talk about whiteness being written into law. And people say, well, that doesn't matter anymore. Well, it kind of does, because it's the history of a country. And so when we are built on our historical memory, and that memory still lives on, it's still relevant if no one has addressed it. Redlining and disinvestment in urban and rural areas systematically strips the poor, disabled, and people of color of opportunities for education, health, wealth, self-sufficiency, and upward mobility. We have said this before. Redlining still happens now. We still have gerrymandering of political maps and voting districts that is very, very much race related. So knowledge of systematic racism is foundational to allyship. It's foundational. You don't have to know everything, particularly not all at once. Baby steps. Learn what you can, one thing at a time. And I'm going to share some resources before we're done tonight. But read books about race and racism and other oppression. Participate in anti-racism education like you're doing right now. But there are things that are much more involved in this. Please choose that after this. And learn about the long-term effects of racial oppression on the welfare of people of color and also people who identify as white. What is the long-term effects of racial oppression on the economy, the environment, the healthcare system, our politics, our political system? It's all right there, but we need to look at it and be courageously looking at it and saying, wow, I didn't know that. I wonder how that history is affecting us today. And I wonder how what we are dealing with today is historically based. So how to be an effective anti-racist, number 4, understand and acknowledge your power and your privilege. We all have, sorry, I touched a button, obviously. We all have some degree of power and we all have some degree of privilege. And we want to recognize in this slide that I put on the left side here, the far empowered, like, so it's on a spectrum. So empowered on one side, oppressed on the other side. And I probably should have reversed them, because usually we say far right is, has a lot of power, far left has no power, but I reversed it. And so we want to look at the fact that in this country, and I dare say across the globe, that the most empowered communities or a group of people in this country are white, male, cisgender, able-bodied, middle-aged, which means that children obviously don't have a lot of power, and also the aged don't have a lot of power. College educated, financially secure, if not wealthy, right? And that's the financially secure is getting less and less. And native English speaker. And so going towards the spectrum of oppression, the darker your skin is, the less empowered you are. And I just want to tell Cassandra there's somebody in the waiting room. Oh, I'll just put her in. Okay. Female, transgender is perhaps arguably one of the most oppressed, and then transgender women of color, the most oppressed. And again, I'm going to ask you to Google that. Differently abled, the aging, someone who's not been to college, someone who's financially insecure, and non-native English speakers, right? So anywhere in there. And I put at the bottom of this slide the term intersectionality, because it's important that we understand that all isms are rooted in supremacist, misogynistic ideologies, right? They are fear-based. So we look at the other and we say sexism, racism, ageism, gender bias, every ableism, every ism is based in some fearful belief that we need to otherize someone so that we can maintain the power. We can maintain power over those people. So that when you look in the middle of the screen, you say race prejudice plus power equals racism. This is a definition of racism that is lifted up by the main educators of anti-racism. So the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, their Undoing Racism workshop is still considered kind of like the zenith of anti-racism training. And this is the definition that they use. But if you look this up, the point of it is to show that racism is a power structure. It isn't just, I like this person, I don't like that person. It isn't just something that bad people are racists, right? If we took all of the racists and put them to the moon, there'd still be racism in this country because it's in the systems. It's systematic. It is a power structure because our structure of society is hierarchical. So it's important that we understand what we're looking at here. Okie dokie. Now let me see. Oops, now I've got, I don't know what I got here. Let me see if I can, I don't know what you're looking at, but my screen just did something funny. There it is. All right. How to be an effective anti-racist number 5. So we need to listen with empathy. And I said this in the first slide, give up your right to be comfortable. Often and I talk in mostly white spaces. Oh, you know what? Let me go back to this slide. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. So I just want to say something here about this. So we all have some power and some privilege, and it's important for people who identify as white to really be able to look and see where they have benefited from some degree of white privilege. And it isn't that it's your fault, right? It's that, so when we start to talk, often when I'm in conversations talking about anti-racism and we start to talk about white privilege, people bristle, right? People who identify as white may bristle, they may get upset, they may just defend that they don't come from a background of privilege. What are you talking about? My father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather, and everybody worked their butt off. And nobody is disputing that, right? White people and that are in my trainings, they didn't make up racism. It's not your fault. You didn't create this. But what's necessary is to look at how you benefit from it, right? Benefit from systems that are set up to empower the people that are listed here on the left and disempower the people that are on the right. And so even people who may identify as white, but may have darker skin, have some degree of oppression in different cultures, right? We have anti-Black sentiment in many different cultures, including cultures of color, indigenous cultures, Black people, brown people. Anti-Blackness is in the culture. So it's just because you are a person of color, for me in particular, and I'm going to use myself as an example, I have a light skin. The idea is we must advocate for people who have less privilege than we do. So for me, I'm going to recognize that I may have a degree of privilege that my darker skinned sisters and brothers don't have in white spaces because of the way that I am received, my level of education, the fact that I'm a reverend, right? All of these things. We must look and see, where does our privilege come from, and be responsible for it and use it to help people who have less privilege than we have. So I wanted to make sure and go back and say that, and there's a lot more I could say there, but I won't. And thank you for letting me go back. I hope that was useful. So what I wanted to say here is that speaking into white spaces, what I hear often is, okay, I don't feel safe talking about race. I don't feel safe. And often what they mean is, I don't feel comfortable, right? I don't feel comfortable. And we have to give up our right to feel comfortable. We have to be able to listen with an ear that says, well, I don't feel comfortable, but I'm not being attacked. Someone is sharing their lived experience. And you can see here the quote that's here on this slide from Annalise Singh, who is the author of the Racial Healing Handbook, which I recommend that everybody gets. And she says, when people of color share their experiences with white supremacy, believe them. They didn't make it up. That's their experience. It's not about you. They're not saying you're bad, you're racist. They're sharing with you, often because you have shown up in that space as an ally. Don't allow your discomfort to make you run away from a space that you could actually do some benefit being in. Listen. Comfort is anathema to growth. We all know the growing edges. In order to grow, we have to be uncomfortable. If we stay in our comfort zones, we don't grow, we don't change, and nothing will change. Compassion for ourselves and our fellow human beings is the gateway to understanding and growing together. We must be compassionate and be willing to be uncomfortable. And if we can sit in the discomfort and just say, wow, this is uncomfortable, but I'm here, I'm listening. Believe me, it's uncomfortable for everybody. It's not just uncomfortable for white people to talk about race. It's uncomfortable for Black people to talk about race. It's just uncomfortable because in this society, right, that has been built on hierarchy and so forth and so on, the voices of people of color have been oppressed, and that's uncomfortable. When we know that a way of life that we enjoy is causing suffering for someone else, we feel it. Even if we don't acknowledge it, it affects us all. And so that's what this is about, right? We need to resist the urge to avoid or deflect or fix something. We don't have to have all the answers. Allies don't have to have all the answers, and they never will have all the answers. But an ally is there to stand with people who have been marginalized and oppressed and hear them and listen and advocate for them. Listen to understand instead of react. As I said, it's not about you. You don't have to react to something. Just listen. I hear you. I got it. I'm sorry. Can I help? Sit with the discomfort and the guilt, right? These feelings come up. And so in a longer course, I do talk with people about, what feelings come up when you talk about race and racism? What feelings come up when I talk about white supremacy? What feelings come up when we talk about oppression? Guilt, fear, anger, frustration, shame is huge in this country. It doesn't help that shame is kind of a marketing tool, right? Almost in this country. Doesn't help. So don't be manipulated by your feelings and emotions. Sit with them and notice what's coming up, because that will allow you to deepen the relationships and to increase your multicultural experience. We need to get into relationship with people who do not look and live like us, who don't think like us, who don't vote the same way we do. We need to get into spaces where we can relate with each other without blaming each other, but really listen and be available. And that requires us to be uncomfortable. You're not going to fix it. So lastly, being an effective anti-racist requires us to participate in individual and collective action against racism. Again, that is what anti-racism is. We have to be active. And so this is a little bit of a review. Seek education with openness. Find ways to learn about the history of people of color, the history of oppressive systems, what is racism, right? Attend relevant lectures, find something to go to, whether it's online or in person, go to a webinar. This is really very important here. Learn about your local government and identify the ways in which oppression is being maintained at institutional and structural levels. This is why it's so important that we pay attention to school board meetings, right? And if we have in Westchester, we have Westchester Coalition for Police Reform. We have the NAACP. We have different organizations offering opportunities for us to learn and grow. We should go to those things and participate, even if we don't participate with our mouth, we participate with our ears and our presence. Pay attention. These things are insidious. Engage in self-exploration, right? Process your emotions related to your whiteness. I said this earlier, right? Feelings come up. We have to just sit with them. And then talk to other white people about them. Have those difficult discussions. Share what you're learning. Oh, I saw this happen the other day and I was shocked. I didn't know. Or, gee, what do you think about this? What do you think about the fact that I read a New York Times article and said that most children of color in public schools don't really see any teachers that are of color, like that, right? Have these discussions, start a book club, join a book club. We have to begin to talk to each other, and white people, we need you to talk to other white people. Our voices, the voices of people of color, are not amplified. They are still not as respected. We don't have access to those spaces necessarily. That is why it is so important for our white allies to show up with us, to show up in protest, and to educate other white people. We can't do it all, and we can't do it alone. You have to make a plan, right? Audre Lorde said the revolution is not a one-time event. We have to plan to stay committed to anti-racist action. This isn't an opportunity that's just gonna come into your inbox if you haven't subscribed to something, right? Oh, anti-racism, I'll just learn about it by going about my everyday life. No, you won't. You have to, on purpose, look for opportunities to learn and grow, and look for opportunities to get involved, and then figure out how to stay involved in a way that works for you, right? We don't want you to show up all the time if that doesn't work for you, but show up when it does work for you in a way that you're showing up as someone who is there to learn and grow and be a part of the movement. Evaluate how you use your money, right? Support Black-owned businesses and choose businesses that support dismantling racism. That does require some research, right? But if you're someone that believes that it's good for people to have unions, then you want to look and spend your money someplace in a company that supports unions, right? That's just an example, okay? Because money is power. In this country particularly, that is the ultimate power stick. That is why people who have money do such a good job making sure that it doesn't get to the masses. Support Black-led groups, right? So resource grassroots Black-led groups doing anti-racist work. You can donate money, you can donate supplies, your time, right? Your skills. Make sure that you are hiring Black people to do work that you have available, pay them fairly, and credit them for their work, right? often Black people and people of color are marginalized for the work that they do. This is not unusual, particularly our corporate structure is still structured that way. Show up to their events and share their information with your community. And I know I'm talking a lot and I'm sorry, but I know that we're coming to our time, the ending of our time. And I just don't want to miss anything here. I really, really hope that you're finding this useful. So I just want to say, if you're looking for something kind of easy to remember, you can look at this and say, okay, well, what are some things that I can just, kind of put on and try on to be more effective in my anti-racism activism? Courageous communication. Be courageous. This takes courage to talk about race and racism to people who may not want to hear it, to have those difficult conversations with your peers, to have a courageous communication with yourself, again, when you're noticing your biases, and to listen compassionately. Again, compassionate listening. Be compassionate with those who are sharing with you their experiences of racial oppression, but also compassionate with yourself when you're experiencing those uncomfortable feelings, right? Step away when you need to step away, do your own internal work, and then come back, right? Be compassionate with yourself and with others. Cross-racial collaboration. Cross-racial collaboration. Go into communities, find out who you can work with, right? As I said before, join anti-racism movements, join people who are doing the work, Black organizations that are doing the work. We have a number of them here in Westchester. And I'll talk about those at the end just quickly. But I'll tell you, one of the things that I always tell people is, as a member of the NAACP is to benefit people of color, but we need our white allies in membership. Come and join us on our meetings, learn, grow, donate, right? The Urban League, those are just two old organizations that have been around forever that are still reaching out in partnership. Consistent action, be consistent. I'm not going to say anything more about that. Find ways to be in action. Conscientious commitment to an anti-racist agenda, right? We talked about what that was already. Dismantling racism, noticing where racism shows up, and being conscientiously committed to that agenda, all right? Hold yourself accountable. So everybody knows this guy, my boyfriend, and he talks about beloved community, right? Beloved community is a community in which everyone is cared for, absent of poverty, hunger, and hate, among other things. And what he said was that our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives. Right? A qualitative change in our souls. We have to be open and forgiving and loving and inclusive, and a quantitative change in our lives. We have to do something differently. When you know better, you do better. So back on the left, right here, this is why non-racism is not sufficient. To say I am not a racist, why do I have to do that? Ignores the systemic and pervasive ignores the systemic and pervasive effects of centuries of oppressive policies and treatment towards people of color. Again, we cannot impact racism if we are not willing to look at the effects of racism and the history of racism. We have to be anti-racist. Racism dehumanizes all of us. We have to take this action, this thought. Racism dehumanizes all of us. And I will take action to understand it, to identify it, and act against it for the good of everyone. This is not just for the good of people of color. This is for all of us to regain our humanity and our capacity for communicating, holding, loving, taking care of each other, building beloved community so that we can save our communities and we can save our planet. It's that important. So some sources of anti-racism education I just wanted to share. These are some biggies, but there are others. The People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, as I said, their Undoing Racism workshop is like the flagship. And we have, we definitely, if you look on the website, you will find workshops in your area. The Centers for Study of White American Culture, I actually do trainings with them. They actually do trainings specifically for white people to help white people understand that there is a culture of whiteness and what that means, and to be able to transcend that culture so that we can be more effective in working together against racism. The Racial Equity Institute you see there, the Equity Consulting Network you see there, and the Anti-Racist Alliance you see there. So Anti-Racist Alliance is steeped in the Undoing Racism of the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And on their website, they have a number of trainings that you can look into. And these are trainings that are mostly online, but there are some in person. I just put this here because I talked to people about starting a book club, but there are many more books that are better than this at this point. This presentation is a year old, at least this slide is. If you need a reading list and you want to get one from me, I would be happy. I'm going to share my email information at the end of this presentation. If you are someone who wants to start a conversation in your community, your faith community, the community where you live, a group of educators, these are very good tools to do this. The Racial Healing Handbook, excellent, has conversation starters, tells you how to have these conversations. The Anti-Racist deck, same thing. All right, so these, there are learning tools that you can just use to map onto if you're just starting this. And that's my contact information right there. And that's my face. So lcobb@prodigy.net. And please, I'm very interested in hearing from people and supporting you. So if you need resources or support, or you'd like me to come talk to your organization, I can certainly do that. And Cassandra, we have 5 minutes, and I don't know what you want to do with that, but let me stop sharing. I just want to thank people for hanging in there. As I say, I hope that was useful. And now I tried to stop sharing, but I couldn't do that. So I don't know, maybe you can stop sharing for me. Oh, there it is. There I am.
So Lane, what do you think of opening up questions and answers for 5 minutes?
I'd be happy to. I try to answer as quick as I can. So if I have any.
Anybody has any questions for Lane, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
All right, Joe Majak. Don't give me a hard one now. I don't have a lot of time.
No, I'm gonna make a quick pitch for you. Many years ago, 2017, I retired from an insurance job and dug into anti-racism. The first thing I did by accident, but it turned out to be the most important thing I ever did, I think, was to take that Harvard test that we talked about at the beginning of Lane's presentation. I thought I was, I didn't think I was a racist or had racist behaviors. I found out I was not a little bit racist, I was moderately racist. And that revelation to me kind of triggered the rest of all this other work. And it's been a great journey. But that's a thing you can do privately without your family and neighbors and friends. If you have a fear of disenfranchising people by everyone knows that you're doing this work, take that Harvard test on your own, offline, quietly, and I hope you had the same experience I did. It definitely changed my whole outlook, and instant humility and just starting over. That's all I want to say, Lang. I'm so glad you recorded it. This is priceless. what you did tonight. It really is. In an hour, it's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. Any other questions or comments? We're all here. Happy to hear from you. Anybody? Anne, I see Anne has her hand up. Anne, unmute.
Self?
There you
Yeah.
go.
Hi, a wonderful presentation. I couldn't write down fast enough. And things that I want to share. I'm starting a book group in the senior living facility that I live in, just as you suggested. But I wanted to piggyback on not offending your relatives. I took the course maybe first time 20 years ago, and then brought others in. And in those days, if you brought others in, you got to take the course again. So it took a lot. But my husband and I at that point had been married about 50 years. And I said, dear, you have to take this course. This is what I want for Christmas. I want you to take this course. This is my birthday and my Christmas present, please. So he said, whatever. So he did it and said it was definitely life-changing, and that it made him whole. And it helped us for another 10 years. We were married for another before he died. And we saw the newspaper, we saw the local hearings, everything that was going on, we could now share, seeing it through the same lens. So if you have the opportunity to do that with your family and your loved ones, please give it a try.
Oh, Anne, you're talking about the Undoing Racism workshop?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
From the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. Thank you, Anne. Thanks for coming.
I just wanted to make a comment from Mount Kisco, if that's okay.
Please.
I just wanted to make sure that we will definitely check to see that we have your racial healing guide available to all our patrons.
Ah, excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All those books are just tremendous resources, and that's a really good one. It's a great conversation starter.
Great. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation already just to start.
Thank you.
So much to digest. Absolutely.
A lot. Yeah, a lot. It's hard for an hour. So I'm going to just say my last goodbyes. Be nice to yourself. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Oh, Megan wants to know, how will the video be available?
I'll be sending it out sometime tomorrow or the day after to everyone who registered, so that people who weren't here, who couldn't come, but still registered for the program, they'll receive the recording as well. So if
That's
you
great.
registered, you'll be receiving the recording.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I want to thank everybody for coming out. Be nice to yourself. This is a lot of information to digest. No matter who you are, these kind of conversations drive up feelings and thoughts. And so I'm just going to invite us to just take a deep breath all together right now. And I'm just going to express so much gratitude for you. And thank you all to all 5 libraries for sponsoring this conversation. And I look forward to the next time we all share space. Again, feel free to reach out to me, lcobb@prodigy.net.
Thank you, Lane.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for coming out.
Keeping his job. Ms. Kevin McCarthy, House Democrats are having